Assalamu alaikum everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Seeker. You know how it's not easy to address the things that have caused us the most pain in our lives? Not doing so can lead us to sabotaging our own successes. Well, at Seekers Institute, we want you to have the ability to transform yourself no matter where you are right now. You can pick up the pieces and move forward if you have the knowledge and the tools to do so. Our guest today will dive deep into her own experiences and bravely share with us some of the most challenging moments of her life. Why? Because she wants us to understand what it takes to move forward despite the obstacles thrown our way. She'll share insights on being a Muslim woman who no longer wanted to be silenced, a single mother who wants to protect her kids, and a worthy woman who is pursuing her purpose. So, let's meet our guest. Welcome back to The Seeker. I'm your host, Arshad Anwar, and I have with me today my guest and former colleague. Very happy to have you on the show, Sabria Mills. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you so much for being on our show.
It's an honor. I'm happy to be here.
Alhamdulillah. I want you to just tell our audience, what is it that you are up to these days?
I'm up to a lot. I run a podcast called the Dope Muslim Woman Podcast. And we are in the thick of season 3 on series 4. And it is a podcast that is based off of a desire for us as Muslim women to define our own narratives, as well as to be a healing space for others. And in addition to that, we focus in on being very intentional in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with ourselves and with each others. As far as my everyday life, I work as a behavioral specialist in Atlanta and an educational consultant. Absolutely love the work that I do. And just very thankful to be a mother of 3 daughters and recently engaged. So that's sort of exciting and scary at the same time.
Well, congratulations on that. On the daughter's part, not the...
No, yeah, just the daughter's part.
Right.
Thank you.
No, very happy for you. Your podcast is really great, and I want you to pick your top favorite episode that you've done so far. What was a topic that you really, really enjoyed doing?
To be honest with you, a little while ago, I did an episode on my actual divorce. I'm a divorced woman, and I decided to take I've always struggled with vulnerability and just kind of showing up and being seen, especially the personal aspects of myself. So I decided to team up with one of the top Muslim therapists in Atlanta, and I would dare I say nationwide, 𝐦𝐚𝐝, and she walked me through and guided me through, and we did a really transparent, vulnerable episode on just what it meant to be a divorced Muslim woman in this day and age. That was definitely my most personal one. And then recently I had one called Love is Blind. And that one I didn't even think that I would be attached to it, but the concept was really about beauty and aesthetics and how we sometimes use it as, it sometimes is a vehicle for us to stay disconnected, and how we kind of see one another. So it really opened up the way that I sort of thought, and in the way that I sort of connected with others. I connected with others aesthetically first instead of with the heart and the soul, and that was awakening for me.
Wow, that's really amazing. What was going on in your life that made you decide, I want to get my voice out there. I want the world to hear what I have to say?
Yeah. Well, I really, like I said, I struggled with vulnerability, and I found myself in a marriage where I found myself really silenced, and I didn't really know how to move beyond being silenced. And when I experienced that third talaq, that third divorce within that one marriage, my whole life shattered, and I just didn't know how to pick up the pieces. And it started with me just trying to figure out who I was. And I just one day woke up, it was like a tahajjud in the middle of the night. I was crying, and I saw an ad come up on my phone about podcasting. I literally just tried it.
A sign. It was a sign.
It was really that's it. And it was just an audio thing. And I still wasn't comfortable showing up, but I allowed it to be a space where I could amplify other women's voices until I had the strength to amplify my own. So
Well,
that's kind of how it started.
That's really deep. Do you get backlash for the topics that you cover?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. Mostly about divorce, though. It's very interesting. I do so many different topics. It's an issues-driven podcast, so we focus in on issues that we believe are, things that are holding us back. I really do focus on the African American, Black, Muslim community, and there are things that are very, very relative and very specific to our experience as Muslims. A lot of us were like, I'm a second generation Muslim. My parents converted. So they're coming out of the era of a lot of racism. My parents were part of like the Black Panther Party. So when you come into sort of consciousness of who you are as just a Black person and dealing with the oppression, and then you come into the knowledge of Islam, there are a lot of layers to that.
Yeah.
And we carry some of those wounds. We carry some of those traumas. And so we have very specific experiences.
Yeah.
So I speak about a lot of issues, but the one which gives, I'm sorry, my dear brothers who I love so much, heart attack is when I talk about divorce. And when
exposes them, or what is it that they get
the main
offended?
thing is that there seems to be a discomfort with making it seem like it's okay, like there's life beyond divorce, like you can actually survive and do it. I've always been accused of encouraging divorce, and that's never something that I do. I just, we understand, if we know the seerah of our beloved messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how normal divorce and marriage was, right?
Divorce and marriage after divorce.
There you go.
How normal all of that actually was.
How normal it was. But yet and still, we want to, sort of isolate our women. We want to make it as taboo. And we want to silence them so that they stay, in my experience, in what I perceive in not so great abusive situations.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing that, you're out there talking about this, because if you're out there talking about it, if you're one person that's experiencing it and talking about it, there's multitudes of other women and other people out there that are going through it. And you mentioned feeling silenced earlier. And so, undoubtedly, you breaking that silence, I know is going to be a great opportunity for others to now get that strength and get that power. How do you deal with the backlash?
To be honest, I've always been a people pleaser. So that's always that's like my nemesis. So I've always been a people pleaser. So it's really been a struggle to move beyond trying to please and be accepted by others, and not wanting to be viewed as a controversial Muslim woman.
Yeah.
Never was that. Never. I always was the straight A Muslim. I went to Islamic school my whole life. Always was the good girl in Islamic school. Did what I was supposed to do. But I've learned that, through this process is that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way he guides us to our purpose sometimes is not always, it's not always beautiful and pretty. And I've had to deal with some pain. The biggest, and just to be very transparent with you, the biggest backlash I've experienced is from my own father. So my own father, who I love dearly, who raised me, just didn't want me to do it. He felt like I was making too many brothers uncomfortable, and he didn't want me to do that. And so if I could endure that sort of backlash, I can endure any other type of backlash. So the biggest pain for me was dealing with sometimes isolation I felt from my own father, and then having to manage others and the community's sort of experience of me. Yeah.
So one of the experiences that you've lived is that of a single mother. And now being engaged and moving on in this new relationship, what is that going to look like? What is that experience like for you?
Wow. I have to say that this is the first time I've ever publicly shared or spoken about this, because being a single mom it comes with so many complexities. And a lot of times when you've experienced pain and when you've experienced heartache, your children have experienced it as well. And you aim as a mother to protect them from all harm, which is one of the reasons why many of us, and I'm speaking on behalf of single moms, because we have times where we just come together and we share and we offer each other that safe space. We don't want to move on. We don't want to start again. We don't want to take a risk with another man when we have children, because us taking a risk is one thing, but putting our children in harm's way, putting our children in a potential risky situation is almost too much for us to bear. So one of the things I've had to do out of the mercy of God is I've had to really take extra steps to heal. I had to go through intense therapy. I have a coach, and I have a inner child spiritual coach. So my coach deals specifically with sort of trauma, generational trauma, inner child healing, and things like that. I had to really go back and identify where a lot of my fears were coming from. I also had to identify why I was showing up in my relationships in a transactional manner. So I had to go back to my childhood. As a single mother, it was really just about survival. Like, it was really just about survival. I was surviving every day, whether it was financially, whether it was just the reality of overwhelm, and then the fear. Every day you're afraid. But when you identify what you're plagued with and what you're pained with, and you go through the process to heal, and you really turn to Allah, tawakkul Allah, you turn your faith and your trust and you give it completely over to God. He opens up doors for you that you wouldn't believe. He offers you people that actually aid in your healing.
Wow.
Right? So for me, it was really about that tawakkul, that trust, and being open. And when I met my brother, my future husband, inshallah, when I met him, I was like, absolutely not. I was like, absolutely not, right? You know?
In the beginning, it's just no.
It was like a no-go.
Defense mechanism.
No, absolutely not. But Allah taught me so much.
Wow.
He taught me so much in that experience. And a lot of it has been so healing for my children because they get to see their mom being so much more authentic and more honest and loving and restoring. And it's the best gift I can give them.
That's amazing. And you mentioned having gone to a coach, right? We're on the Seeker. This is going to be Seekers Institute. And for the benefit of our audience, what kind of an attitude do you need to have to succeed as someone that's getting coached?
Yeah. You have to really coaching is different from therapy. I've had both, I've experienced both, and both have its benefits. Sometimes when you really have intense trauma, you have to have a safe place. Therapy walks you through it. For me, though, and what I knew I wanted to accomplish, I knew coaching would be more effective for me because I needed someone that was going to keep me accountable and make me do the work.
Okay.
Right? It was about doing the work. So as far as a mindset, you have to be willing to really do the work and taking ownership of your own process and your own experience. I also found coaching focused a lot more on the future, focused more on manifesting what I wanted to see, what I wanted to experience, and not harping so much on my pain. The pain is there for me to be aware, for me to understand, for me to identify my triggers, those things that I may have that may sabotage my success. But where I found coaching as being something that really worked for me is that every single session, I was manifesting what I wanted to see in my future and in my life.
And that was coming from you?
That was coming from me. I had to do the work.
You had to do the
work. I had to do the work. So it didn't create a codependent relationship between myself and my coach, as I feel like maybe perhaps a little bit it did in therapy. I'm just so much more aware.
Wow. So
much more aware. I strongly recommend coaching, and I push it all the time on my podcast. Strongly recommend coaching.
Awesome. And go back to your podcast.
Yeah.
When you talk about these things, again, and you do it for, I'm sure, many different reasons, but one of the outcomes is that people feel more empowered.
Yeah.
Right? And as an imam, when you're speaking on the minbar, you're telling people information. We hope that they feel empowered and motivated to go and take action. But what's one of your what's the biggest thing you do to intentionally empower people?
Offering space. Offering space. It sounds really small, but a lot of us go through our days without actually having a safe space to be seen or to be heard. Offering space does so much to empower. When you offer space for people to authentically show up as they are, and to share their experiences, to define their own narratives, it allows them to really be able to be fully empowered In my experience on the show, I typically go after guests who are heartbroken, who have a history of being silenced. I don't go after the heavy hitters on my show. So there's a lot of coaching that's actually involved before they have the strength to actually come on screen.
Okay.
And in that empowerment process, it's a lot of releasing that they need to do, and they need to just feel safe. It's just about feeling safe and having space. And after they go through that process and they actually allow themselves the opportunity to just speak their truth, from there, I've seen them accomplish so many different things.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I keep hearing you refer back to tawakkul and turning back to your faith. And being a Muslim woman is who you are, right? Being a Muslim is what this is all about. What have you found in the faith that has particularly kept you going through all the different, things you've experienced in life?
Authenticity. A lot of times when I was growing up as a young Muslim woman, again, second generation, we were sort of browbeat with a lot of hadiths. A lot of hadiths, a lot of do's and don'ts. This is haram, this is halal, without much understanding. And our experience with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a lot to do with what you should and shouldn't do, how you should look, how you should dress, how you should talk. But what I've learned is if you attach yourself to his life, how he truly lived and how he experienced people, in that you can identify humanity. You can identify how he exemplified being human. And I've learned with my experience with being Muslim and all the things I should be and shouldn't be as a Muslim woman, it really is just about being a human being. Yeah. It really is that simple. And that's the simplicity of what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ modeled. And when we tap into our humanity, when we tap into ourselves, we're able to tap into a connection to the divine, to a connection to the Creator. And it is in that space where I find my peace. It is in that space. It's just authentic. It has nothing to do with an expectation of how I'm supposed to be, how I shouldn't be. It is about my heart being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Oftentimes people feel like they're losing God when they go through difficulty. And what would you say to our audience that people might be feeling that right now, that there's adversity, there's challenges, and I feel like I'm getting more and more distant now. But as someone that's found themselves drawing closer, what piece of advice could you offer them?
First, I want to say that I want to acknowledge that it's difficult and that it's a challenge. And I think sometimes we get into these spaces where we offer people advice, and sometimes we can be dismissive to their pain and to their experiences. I went through that. And one of the challenges I saw a lot with Muslim women is divorce, because our identity sometimes as Muslim women is wrapped into being a wife, wrapped into being a good mom. And when that crashes, we no longer know who we are. And because we put people in the place in our heart where only God should exist, our faith can be shattered. So often what I've done is I often go back to just how you love and who you love, right? Yeah. You have to find power in your heartbreak. Heartbreak is a gift. When my heart was shattered, when I lost my husband, who I put in that place in my heart that no human being should reside. When I lost my husband and when I lost the reality of being the good wife, because I promise you, I thought I was top-notch wife. That was what I was trained to be. When I lost that reality, I wasn't sure even if I could get up to pray. Wow. I wasn't sure. Like, that connection was broken. I couldn't understand why God would do this to me, right? And that's just me being very honest. Yeah. But the gift that he gave me out of his mercy, the gift that he gave me is that he removed from my heart, right? Something that was the barrier between me and him. Wow. And sometimes you have to allow yourself to go through that authentic process of loss. Yeah, sometimes you can feel like you're losing your faith. And sometimes you have to allow yourself space to go through that process. But in the end of it, you have to acknowledge the gift. Just like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was stripped. He lost his father, his mother, his sons, Khadija, radiallahu anha.
Yeah.
Where did that take him? Closer to the divine, closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's hard to say when you're in the thick of heartbreak, but it is really a gift.
You have a choice always. It's a difficult choice. We get to make the choice. Are we going to lose faith? Are we going to choose faith? And, I guess if we're going to choose faith, then we're going to find so many more doors opening for us. But as you said, it's so important to acknowledge the difficulties that people go through, and not to try and fix everything for them, but let them find their own path forward, as you did as well. If you had to do this all over again, would you do something different?
I wouldn't do anything different. It's been an experience, and to be very honest with you, I really believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pushing me every step of the way. A lot of times I don't know what to do next, and I pray and I pray and I pray, and an idea will just sort of come, and then the facilitation of it will happen. So I know that anything that's happening for me is not from me. It really isn't. So I wouldn't do anything differently. The only thing that I would reevaluate is how I engage my community, especially my brothers. That's a really difficult space for me to sort of try as a Muslim woman to understand my Muslim brothers, especially if I've experienced sort of hardship and pain, right? Loss of a husband, loss of a father, loss of those relationships. I think I would take more time into really sort of understanding those dynamics and those relationships, because I always want to do justice. Whenever I'm delivering, especially in the podcast world, I always want to do justice, and I don't want to speak for my brothers or to strip them of their experiences, or even to unfairly not offer space for them. If there was anything I could be reflective of, it would be.
Well, as an observer of your podcast, I have to say you always have great representation of men and women. So you definitely allow people the space on your platform to express themselves, which is something that, as an observer, I can honestly say. In closing, and we've had a really deep conversation, you've gotten into a lot of really great things here, and I hope that our viewers understand the value of vulnerability from what you're talking about. Because it takes a lot to sit here and openly talk about this, but I hope they see that that is a path forward towards healing and towards moving ahead. If you can give our viewers one tip, if they're thinking about doing something, taking a leap, something they've been thinking about for a long time, how would you encourage them to go ahead and take action?
I would have first, like I said, I always like to first acknowledge and offer space for how difficult that process is. Because I think, like I said, it's so many of us with the social media culture, with Instagram culture, we look at other people and it can be so discouraging. So stepping outside of faith, stepping outside of your fear and stepping out on faith is something that it's a process. It is a process. For me, I couldn't just go out there and just say, I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z. I did do that a little bit, and I fell on my face. And I did things that weren't aligned with my purpose. So you can go ahead and do that. Or you can get still first. You can get really quiet first. And you can deal with yourself. And you can fix sort of the inner wounds or the pains or the things, the difficulties that you're personally struggling with. You can address those first. You have to clean it up. It's just like having a wound. You have to clean it up before you can be healed, before you can actually be that better version of you, before you sometimes can even move beyond your fear. You have to identify the fear first. You really have to identify the fear. So I would strongly recommend getting still. I would strongly recommend getting a mentor or a coach. And I would strongly recommend doing some inner work before taking that leap.
Wow. Excellent advice. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for opening up. And thank you for offering what you've learned with your struggles and your endeavors and your successes. And it's really, again, it's a real honor to have you. We've been friends and colleagues now for quite a while, and I'm very happy that what you're doing on your podcast, hopefully what we're doing on this show, that we're able to empower people stronger together.
And can I just say that I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for the friendship and just for the advice. You've supported me in so many of my endeavors over the years, and I'm just happy to share this space with you right now.
Just trying to get some of that ajr.
MashaAllah.
Allah bless. 𝐬𝐴𝐿 khair for being on our show.
𝐦𝐚𝐝𝐿. Thank you for having me.
And I will be back with my closing thoughts. Here's a sneak peek of next week's episode.
And that headache can go away. And so, I always teach people that with the mind, you can make medicine or poison, and so it's based on how we're living, what thoughts we produced.
Seekers Institute exists to show you how to transform yourself in a holistic way. Get on board for the Seeker's journey and master faith, family, finance, fitness, fun, friends, and your future. Go to 𝐒𝐚𝐝�institute.com right now and get started. Our guest today allowed us to look deep into her experiences. She modeled for us what it means to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And not just for the sake of vulnerability or for anyone to feel sorry, but to be vulnerable to allow ourselves to heal and be stronger than we were before. Our Prophet ﷺ clearly modeled for us that being vulnerable does not detract from faith. When he first received revelation, the experience shook him so much that he ran back home and asked to be covered under his sheet. There, his wife Khadija radiallahu anha, his closest friend, his confidant, his consultant, lifted him up. She told him that Allah would never humiliate someone like him. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, and she was the coach he needed to remind him of who he was. All of us have struggles, and we do live in a culture where showing vulnerability is thought to be a sign of weakness. As our guest said, when you have a wound, you have to clean it up in order to heal. All of us can heal from our wounds and be stronger than we were before. So, now that you know, Seekers Institute can show you how.